Have you ever wondered if you could actually get smarter? I mean, really, truly increase your intelligence? Today, we're going to dive into a pretty radical idea that genius isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. We're going to break down the exact trainable habits that some of the greatest minds in history used to shape their incredible intellects.
So let me ask you this. What if I told you your IQ is not fixed? Not when you're 18, not when you're 25, not even at 50. For so long, we've been told that intelligence is basically genetic. You get what you're given and that's that. But what if that's not the whole story? Not even close.
I mean, just think about these three guys. Albert Einstein, his teachers literally thought he was a slow learner. Charles Darwin was just an average student who couldn't stand memorizing things. And Thomas Edison, he was actually expelled from school and branded unteachable. These are not the origin stories you'd expect from people who would go on to completely change the world, right?
So, what was the secret sauce? What changed? Well, it wasn't some sudden genetic miracle. It was their habits. They consciously developed specific mental routines that literally rewired how their brains worked. And that's the core idea we're going to unpack today. Intelligence isn't something you have, it's something you build.
Okay, so let's get practical. How did they actually pull this off? We're going to start by breaking down the first 3 habits, and these are all about changing the very process of how you think.
All right, first up is a big one, and it's totally counterintuitive in our modern world. Deep thinking without constant input. I mean, we live in an age of nonstop information, right? Podcasts, articles, videos. We're trained to think that getting smarter means just pouring more and more information into our brains. But the science actually shows that the real growth, the real insights happen when we finally turn that fire hose off.
See, real growth happens when your brain is forced to work with what it's already got. This quiet, undistracted state activates something in your brain called the default mode network. Just think of it as your brain's creative workshop. It's where all those amazing aha moments come from, where you finally connect all these random, scattered ideas into one brilliant insight.
And Einstein was the absolute master of this. He would do these thought experiments, just walking alone for hours with no books, no notes, just a single powerful question, pondering what happens if I chase a beam of light. And that silence, well, that led to the theory of relativity. It wasn't about consuming more data, it was about generating something new from within.
And this leads us perfectly into our second habit, productive struggle. Most of us are taught to see struggle as a bad thing. If something's hard, it must mean we're not smart enough. But the most brilliant people completely flip this idea on its head. They don't immediately reach for the answer. They learn to sit with the discomfort of not knowing. Psychologists call this productive struggle, and it's exactly what it sounds like. When your brain is trying, failing, adjusting, and trying again, that's like a workout. It's the mental equivalent of lifting weights. That feeling of strain, that's what's strengthening the neural connections. The struggle itself is the very thing that builds a stronger brain.
So how can you actually do this? A great way is to try the Benjamin Franklin method. Just read an article or an essay, then put it away, completely out of sight, and try to rewrite the main arguments from memory. I'm telling you, it's going to be hard, but that's the whole point. After you've struggled, then you compare your version to the original. This forces your brain to not just recognize the information, but to actually retrieve it, organize it, and make it your own.
Now this connects directly to our third habit, using writing as a tool to think, not just to record. Most of us, when we take notes, we're just trying to store information for later, right? But the smartest people in history used writing as an active process to clarify what was going on in their own heads.
And you can really see the difference here. Writing to record is passive. The goal is to create a library of facts. But writing to think, that's active, it's dynamic, it's messy. The goal isn't to have perfect notes. The goal is to wrestle with an idea on the page, to turn a vague feeling into a precise thought, and to figure out what you don't understand. The outcome isn't a library, it's a discovery.
Okay, so we've covered how to change the way you think. Now let's get into the next 3 habits, which are all about building the underlying mental architecture for a smarter, more flexible brain.
Habit 4 is all about building mental models. Think of it like this. Instead of just memorizing a ton of random, disconnected facts, geniuses collect a toolkit of big, powerful ideas that explain how the world works. Each one of these big ideas is a mental model.
So for example, from physics, you learn the fundamental model of cause and effect. From biology, you learn about adaptation. When you start collecting these core concepts from totally different fields, your brain becomes like a Swiss Army knife. You can take a principle from economics about incentives and suddenly apply it to understand a family argument. This ability to connect ideas across different domains is a true hallmark of genius.
Okay, next up we have habit number 5, deliberate memory training. And here's a really critical point. Memory isn't just some party trick. It's the absolute foundation of intelligence. You simply can't think deeply about a topic if you can't hold its most important parts in your working memory. I mean, Nikola Tesla is the ultimate example here. His memory was so well trained that he could literally build, test, and even take apart entire complex machines in his imagination before he ever touched a single screw. Now, that wasn't a superpower. That was a skill that he worked on and cultivated his entire life.
And finally, we have habit 6, protecting your cognitive energy. You know, our whole hustle culture tells us that working more and grinding harder always leads to better results. But the greatest minds knew that this is just flat out wrong. Your brain doesn't get stronger during the grind, it gets stronger during the recovery. Just take a look at Charles Darwin's typical day. He really only did about 4 hours of deep, focused work. The rest of his time was spent walking, resting, and just thinking. He understood that things like boredom and rest aren't weaknesses, they are essential fuel for deep insight.
So there you have it, 6 incredibly powerful habits. But the real secret here isn't just to pick one and try it randomly. The key is to see them all as part of a single, interconnected system for building your intelligence.
And this is maybe the most crucial point of all. Intelligence isn't about finding some magic hack or a weird trick. Real, lasting growth comes from building a consistent system of habits that you practice day in and day out.
You know, the geniuses that we look up to, they weren't born as a different species. They just built better systems for themselves. They created routines and habits that allowed their intelligence to grow almost as a side effect.
So, remember this. You don't chase intelligence, you don't hunt it down. You build it. Brick by brick, one habit at a time, one day at a time, one productive struggle at a time. It's an active, ongoing process of construction.
So that really just leaves one final question for you to think about. Looking at these 6 habits, deep thinking, productive struggle, writing to think, building mental models, training your memory, and protecting your energy, which brick are you going to lay down first?